We pulled a couple of the logs out of the fire and we're just like waving them in the air, trying to like scare it away. And then that's when a rock that was more like probably about that size just thudded right in front of us. And we were like, that's not a bear. What is that?
You're listening to the Cryptid Crew Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Childers. Before we get started, if you've had an encounter or an experience or just something unexplained, click on our link tree in the description and share your encounter. Thank you for listening to the Cryptid Crew Podcast. On this episode of the Cryptid Crew Podcast, I have the privilege of introducing outdoorsman and cryptid enthusiast Chino. Chino, thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. We've talked before on the phone and we've met before as well. And you have told me about a pretty neat encounter that you had in New Mexico. Yeah. Tell the listeners about that encounter and just kind of go into detail if you can.
Yeah. So I was a Boy Scout and later on around late 90s, we're pretty much all Eagle Scouts and getting to be almost adults there. And some of us were adults. We started doing venture crew stuff. And this one was out in Philmont, which is a scout camp out in New Mexico. It's right on the western edge of as you're entering the Rockies. So the mountains are there, but it's not the Rockies you would normally think of. These are like very arid and there's pine trees and stuff, but you're kind of in more desert, dry landscape. And so we were out, we picked a trek that was, I think it was like 130 miles or something like that. So we were doing quite a bit out there. On one night, pretty late into it, like I think this was over the course of like a little under 2 weeks, basically. We had one day that it was going to be really long and we had to hike a few miles. Then we had to go down this valley and then back up this other side of this ridge line. And it was going to get us to kind of the base of Mount Phillips. And that hike that day was going to be like 11 or 12 miles. So we started pretty early and pretty much spent the whole day until the sun was starting to go down. That's when we kind of got to camp. And so it was a long day, but once we got to camp, we were on the other ridge line, and it overlooked this whole valley and everything. And it was actually really, really cool spot. It's those pine trees that are kind of like spread out. So there's not a lot of foliage anywhere. It's all like basically like just a pine tree here and there. And a lot of pine needles on the ground. So we ended up just having a regular night. We started having a fire and we were going to turn in kind of early. So it was only like 9 or 10 at most. And then we started hearing some stomping coming closer to us up the mountainside. And we assumed it was going to be a bear because it's very common out there for especially black bear. And so we did what we were told to do, which is like you stand in a cluster and you grab your pots and pans and you like everybody makes themselves really large. And so there was like 7 of us. So we're all standing around together and this thing starts coming closer and closer. And we all have, at the time, it wasn't headlamps, it was flashlights. And so we all have flashlights, but they only go so far. And whatever this was like just out of the range. And every now and then we get a glimpse of like a shadow moving back and forth. And we were listening. And one of the guys was like, he's like, I don't hear, it's only two steps. And then it sounded like it was kind of like, it wasn't running. It was kind of like just big stepping back and forth out in the shadows. And we can start to hear, it was like, it was well aware we were there. And now we're like, get out of here, bear, get out of here. And it made a couple gruff type noises towards us. And we were kind of like getting puzzled because it didn't sound like what we would think. Like we've seen bears before, but it didn't sound like what we would know a bear to sound like. But then the otter thing happened, which was a small rock that was like, I don't know, like palm size, just kind of bounced and rolled right in front of us. And then we were like, I remember being like, can a bear throw a rock? And then my friends looked at each other. We're all like, bears throw rocks? Bears throw, like, we were just kind of panicking. And then it's moving around in the, back and forth still. And so I go back and go to the campfire, and one of the other guys had the same idea, and we pulled a couple of the logs out of the fire, and we're just like waving them in the air, like, trying to like get it, like scare it away. And then that's when a rock that was more like probably about that size just thudded right in front of us. And we were like, that's not a bear. What is that? And then we're like, now we're like, we're not yelling anymore. Now we're just kind of standing there and panicking with the flashlights, trying to see anything. And then we hear this thing like start crashing through some trees, and it's like shaking some trees around. And then one of the trees you just hear it crackling, and it's like popping and making all these noises. And then, so we're still kind of standing in a line and, on the edge of our campsite area. And then out of the darkness, just this log that was probably about that wide diameter and maybe like 6-7 feet wide, just comes flying over our heads, lands into our campground, and then just rolls through the like campfire. And we all ducked, but it was probably like 2-3 feet above our heads. Like, it was way over our heads. And we now were like, what is this? And at the time, none of us were like thinking like this could be a Bigfoot thing or anything. It was, we were just kind of stunned. And then the thing like gave uh like roar, but it was kind of like as if like felt, honestly, man, it felt like it was annoyed we were there. Like, it felt like move, like get out of the way, go away kind of thing. But when it roared, that you could feel it in your chest, and it was like, the description I would say is it's really weird. It's a deep bellow, like gut roar, like an animal would do, but then there's like a combination of almost like a grown man that has a high, like a pitchy sound to it, combined into one. It's a bizarre sound. It rattled us, and we all kind of backed up into our campsite more, try to get closer to the fire. And then we just heard it just start stomping down the ridge line. It's a decent steep ridge. We had to like switchbacks all the way up, and it just went straight down it. And when it was going down, we could hear it stomping for a little bit. And then about, we're now like, is it gone? Is it gone? And we're all talking to each other and trying to reassure each other. And uh, we started throwing all the logs on the fire, just like build that thing up high as it could go. And I remember we were still like standing guard kind of for about, I don't know, 20-25 minutes. And then we kind of backed off and went towards the fire and just were hanging around the fire thinking like, okay, I think it's gone. But then from across the valley, probably about 30-35 minutes, we just hear that same roar, and you could hear it go across the entire valley. And that give you an idea how much land that covered. It took us like probably like 4 hours to do the whole back. We had to do all these switchbacks, and then there's a few miles in between on that valley floor, and then going on to the other side. That took us like so much of our hike. And in 30-40 minutes, that thing was clear across that valley. And so it was a weird one. And the next morning, when we're all packing out, we go over there to where we heard all where it was. We were just kind of investigating it, and that's where we found there was it wasn't a massive tree, but basically that log, we could see where it uprooted the tree, and stepped on the base, snapped near the base, and then on the top half, it just broke that off. And then the top half was still laying there. So the log it threw at us, it literally just snapped that out of the ground and then chucked that thing at us. And then the ground there is really hard. It's all dried out. You're basically up on top of this like, mountain range ridge line. So we didn't see any footprints or anything like that. But later on that trip, about 2 days later, we were down in one of these valleys and it happened to have I guess they had like a shower go through there and there was mud and stuff in there. And sure enough, we saw this footprint in there. And like I said to you, I have a photo of it somewhere, like a hard photo. If I can find it, I'll send it to you. But I put my Nalgene next to it to give a size because the footprint was in the water in this mud and it was a good imprint. And that was my first brush with anything like thinking Bigfoot or anything that direction. And it was, I would say, not quite double the size of the Nalgene, but close to it. And I don't know if you're familiar with what a Nalgene is. It's like an old water bottle, the plastic ones.
Right.
They had the screw off lids. And so yeah, man, it was a weird one. It was very interesting. Never saw anything, can't definitively say what it was, but never had a bear throw anything at me. The uprooting thing, I've definitely seen that before, but not like snapping logs and throwing that. To me, I mean, obviously, I think without seeing it, that's where I would go towards with like the interesting thing is I've heard on videos online where people have like played something where they've been out there, and especially if you go to the sounds from New Mexico, I've I've heard it where people recorded it and it's the same sound. So it's definitely interesting to me, but yeah.
Yeah, I have a recording. I'll send that to you as well to tell
Yeah.
me if it
I'll never
similar to
forget
what
it.
you.
So
Right.
yeah, if it's similar, I'll know instantly.
Right. Well, you're talking about you didn't definitively know that it was a Bigfoot or whatever, but yeah, you add the pieces together.
Yeah.
It took a thumb to throw a rock, a thumb or hands to break a tree and throw it at you guys. And
It's the
let
throwing
me,
part. Yeah, if it was
yeah,
just like if it was just one of those elements where like the tree got broken or a single rock rolled towards us or something, but the fact that it was multiple things, and so when I say that I think it was like annoyed that we're there, it felt like it was just kind of going up that ridge line and it wanted to go to the other side and we just happened to be there. And it was like it just wanted to get around us, but also was really annoyed because now we're yelling at this thing thinking it's a bear. So to me, it was like it was just trying to get us to go away. But it's interesting because as scary as it was, I honestly don't feel like it was trying to hurt us. Because if it was like that log, it could have easily thrown that lower. We would have, you know, anywhere it would have hit us, we would have been messed up.
sure. Chino, how long did the encounter last?
Oh
If you had
man,
to
it could,
guess,
if honestly, like everybody like thinks it lasts forever, it was probably like a couple minutes at most. It it did feel like it went back and forth a few times. The uprooting of the tree, the throwing the rocks, yeah. So it was probably like 2-3 minutes at most, which probably means it was like 1 to 2 minutes at most. Normally, everybody gets in that panic mode. So
did any of you guys think Bigfoot at the time or that night? Or what was your first thought?
So after the fact, when we were all kind of standing around the fire, a couple of guys were saying it, and then we quickly stopped talking about it. I think it was just that fight or flight where nobody wanted to relive whatever we just went through, especially while it was still nighttime. The next day, we were hiking the opposite direction. So once we got enough distance, it was kind of like that was a crazy experience. And then we would talk about it, but it was kind of one of those things where you're just like processing it, I think. And I remember talking about it for a little bit with a couple of the guys, but then some of the guys didn't want to talk about it at all. And I think it's just trauma. But yeah,
Sure.
it's one of those where I'll definitely, it was the first experience I ever had that made me, I've always been skeptical, but then I was like, maybe plausible now, like rather than skeptic, it's more like, oh, okay, this could we just don't understand everything, you know?
Yeah, that was definitely no bear would do that.
I don't think
Um,
so. Yeah.
and there's really nothing else.
We've had
You
a
have mountain lions and things like that there as far as vocalizations. I'm
yeah.
thinking, but
I've had run-ins with all of them. A lot of bear encounters, and it didn't react in a way that I know bears to. The stomping and stuff, it was interesting because that was actually one of the tells that made me feel like it wasn't a bear because when it was heavy enough where when it would stomp, we can like hear the impact. And there was a couple of us just being like 2 feet, 2 feet. Like it doesn't sound like it's on all fours. And normally when you hear bear and stuff, they're pretty clumsy. Like you hear them like snapping a bunch of branches and stuff, but you can hear normally the pads, like when they're hitting, if they're close enough. This thing, I don't have a guess anymore on like the distance, but it felt pretty darn close. But our flashlights back then, we had like mag lights, like the old school, and then we didn't have the big ones. It was just like the backpack style. So these things were pretty weak, man. It wasn't very helpful to try to get any distance on the being able to see out there.
did you guys get any sleep that night?
Most of us stayed up pretty late around the fire, and we kept stoking that fire. We ended up gathering up a bunch of wood around the campsite, and we actually ended up using that log. It didn't burn very well. It's not dry enough, so we took that off at some point, but we tried to burn that even. Yeah,
Did you have any discussions with any of the witnesses with you down the road about the encounter?
yeah,
Like later
yeah, and
on,
I think
years
we all
later?
agreed. Majority of us were all on the same page that um some guys were like, that it had to be Bigfoot kind of thing. Other of us were just kind of like, well, I don't know what it obviously wasn't a bear, but we didn't want to like just
Yeah,
be the people who are like, it has to be this.
right.
But yeah, we had plenty of talks over it, and then it just kind of faded out. And it's funny because I've had a lot of experiences with those guys, and we had a number of different encounters, and then all of them, like, I wonder if they would talk about it now. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, some people handle it, different ways. Some
Yeah.
people don't want to talk about it, of course, and then some people are afraid, don't want to bring it up for the fact of it's traumatizing or either ridicule.
Yeah. Like when I tell any of my friends or somebody I meet or whatever, I'll be like, yeah, I had an encounter. I I always try to be pretty easygoing about it, not like over the top because you don't know how someone's gonna react to but most people are like, yeah, that's a weird one. And also I think anybody I've told was like, that's not a bear. Bears don't do that. So seems pretty obvious that something else.
No, the broken tree flying over you guys' head, that's just insane.
That was alarming. Honestly, we didn't expect it. I thought it was shaking the trees, like, to scare us, and I thought it just happened to crack one. It turned out it was actually like, you could see the indention in the ground where it was stomping a part of the tree to break it. You could see, like, that it, like, caved, like, a part of the hole, and then part of the roots of the base of that tree was, like, out of the ground. Yeah, it was nuts, man. That was weird.
It took something with some strength and
Yeah,
power.
yeah. Yeah, like, insane strength, like, and like I said, it wasn't a full-grown tree or anything, but regardless, it's a thick tree. To be able to just step on it and break it is pretty crazy, or just to pull something by, where its roots start coming out. Yeah, it's pretty intense. It was cool.
Let me ask, yeah, yeah. Let me ask you
In
this.
hindsight, it was cool. Maybe not
You're
at the
right,
moment.
hindsight.
Yeah,
Looking back, yeah, after you guys are safe and back to where
yeah,
you wanted to be or needed to be, it
yeah.
sounded like it was either wanting to escort you guys out or it was irritated, like you said, and wanted you guys out of there.
That's my guess. And it's interesting because that area later on, I think a couple years ago, and I don't know exactly how close it is, but I know it's in the same area. There's that train that was going through the mountain range there in New Mexico. The train stopped and that they saw like a Bigfoot squatting behind a bunch of bushes or something. And I was like, I think that's in the same general area, at least within like 50 miles of where we were. And it's an
Okay.
easy place to locate if someone wanted to look it up because it's Philmont Scout Camp. So it's a pretty broad area that it covers.
Yeah, on the BFRO website, New Mexico, it has probably 45 or 50 uh, encounters or reports on their website. So it's an
Yeah, I
active
believe it.
state.
It's interesting too because it's not the forest there isn't like super dense. It's like that kind of sprawling pine trees where if you're looking across like with binoculars, you can see the other ridge and you can see through the trees sometimes. And so, you know, it just seems like it's not like a high covered area for something to hide. So I would imagine like there has to be other people who witnessed a bunch of stuff out there, but yeah, makes sense
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. And that's what's reported. And there's no telling what's not reported, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you want to have another encounter like that?
You know, like it's like that what is it? Like the type A adventure or whatever where it's like or type B adventure where you in the moment you're losing your mind and you think like you're going to die, but then afterwards you're like that was pretty cool. I'm happy that I had that moment. I would say that I wouldn't mind having another encounter only because I really think I don't think this thing was out to hurt us. Like I really do feel like it just was like trying to scare us to like leave it alone or to get out of the way or whatever, right? And all these like people who have these encounters and stuff, I've never heard anybody say that it hurt them. So if these are out there, like I've never heard anybody once say like I got attacked. It's just not. I mean, maybe you have. I don't know, but I feel like it's just not very common to hear anybody. They had, you know, everybody gets scared, everybody gets like things happening, but it doesn't seem like anybody's been attacked, as far as I know.
Yeah, very rare. But most of the time you hear something like that, like you describe, it's an intimidation factor.
Yeah, and that's what I feel like it was doing. So in that sense, yeah, it'd be great to have like something else that like where I could actually have seen it. That would have been cool, but all we saw was a big shadow stomping around.
Right. That's a pretty interesting encounter you had. Let me ask you this, Chino, kind of transition into something else. You live in the Pacific Northwest.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
And
we actually have full towns dedicated to this stuff, and it's funny because like I don't know, I'm sure there's a lot of encounters out here. I haven't run into anybody yet, though.
well, that's what I was going to bring up. The Washington has the most by far on the BFRO website. They
I
have
didn't know that, but I believe it. Yeah.
yeah, I think it was 720 or something like that, and that's
Wow.
double what double what Oregon, Ohio, and even Florida they have. I think in the
There's
300
parts of
range.
Washington that are like incredibly dense and also just nobody can get to. I believe it. There's so much like wild wildlife space out here and pretty rugged terrain. I could totally see things being out here and not being able to be found. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool. I didn't know that.
and Oregon's the same way. You know, it's similar to Washington
Mhm.
as far as the terrain
The
and such.
forest, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Chino, let me ask you this. Are there any other cryptids that interest you or you have interest in?
Sure. These days, like I'm pretty open minded to it all because like I just think it's interesting, and especially if something has a number of encounters where it's not just one time thing, where it doesn't feel like anomaly as much as like, oh, this is statistically more people. There's too many people for this to just not be real. I like that. So things that and uh, like I've been a couple places, like I was in Puerto Rico and we're in this mountain bar. My uncle had family that was from Puerto Rico, so they took us to like some local places out in the mountains, and we were at this one bar called the Tiger Bar, and it's literally just like a shack, a roof shack, and no walls, and just a bar in the middle of the jungle. It felt like, but uh, people there were mostly other than us. We were like The only non-locals, everybody else there was either somebody hiding out, not wanting to be found, or just farmers. And so with my limited Spanish, I asked them about Chupacabra, and the bartender pointed at a bunch of the farmers down the bar, and they were happy to talk to me about it. They were nice guys, but you could tell it like plagued them. And they told me that this thing was like it'd come around and it was killing all their livestock, but it was all goats and chickens for the most part. And they've said that it would leave them their animals just dry. And for them, it wasn't. For me, it was like a novel. Like it was just novelty of hearing it, and it was just cool. But for them, it was like their livelihoods were just getting depleted. They said it was like, yeah, they were somewhat scared of it, but more like they wanted to just get rid of it. And I just thought it was interesting because for me, like hearing it from firsthand encounters, people who actually like were there or being affected by it, gives it also it brings it more to reality to me of like, oh, this is not just some story. These are people who are living with this thing or whatever it is. So it's like, okay, yeah, maybe there's something to it. It makes it a little more plausible in my head. I've always tried to be a skeptic, or I think I'm partially just that way. But as I get older, it's like the more experiences I hear about stuff, the more I'm open minded about things. And like I said, I think that Bigfoot one was like the first one to like really open me up to things where I'm like, yeah, we don't know anything.
Yeah, that's pretty neat to hear firsthand encounters of something, well, a chupacabra sighting or an encounter
Yeah.
with farmers. And it seems like their version might be slightly different than the version that you hear about in Texas
Yeah.
or maybe in Mexico, possibly of a canine type of
I
animal
think
or creature.
I think there's also like a lot of false positives on that, like false identification, where people 100% saw something, but it's amazing how different animals with mange just look so warped, look so crazy. And if even like a raccoon, if you look up a raccoon with mange, and now the internet allows us to see all these animals with mange, otherwise you'd rarely see it, especially if it's a terrible case where all of the hair's gone. A raccoon has opposable thumbs. Like it basically looks like it can hold on to things and in like hands. I could totally see how that could be confused. But in other cases, how do you explain like the missing blood? That's weird. I don't know. I don't have that answer.
Yeah, I don't either, but I've heard that, and in a lot of the cases where like you said, livestock is killed, goats or chickens, and there's no sign of blood
Yeah.
around the animal or even in the animal. So where does that go, or what caused that? That's a mystery for sure.
Yeah. Also, Texas is it's a weird place, man. It has a lot of. I lived down there in Austin for a little while, and um, the even the animals like the big game like boars and stuff that they hunt larger than life. Like people don't believe they think it's like a or something because of how big these pigs get and these different animals and stuff. And it's like I've heard a lot of stories down there, of just different things down like especially around Corpus Christi and stuff like that. But yeah, there's some interesting things down there.
Yeah. What would you tell a skeptic about Bigfoot?
Uh, So I think the best thing I would say is it's kind of my standpoint. It's like I'm not trying to sway anybody to believe something they're not believing because like there's no point in me. I don't need to preach about like oh it exists or it doesn't exist or whatever. I just know my own experience, and I will say the experiences that I had that were always the more unusual ones tended to be when I was camping, especially deep woods, where you're out like not just a day trip or a weekend trip, where we're going miles and miles into the wilderness. That's where a lot of the experiences we had took place where I realized like oh, it's more likely because there's no people there, you know. Um, I think there is something to why these things are not discovered as often is because they're probably just hiding out or they're not trying to be found. I don't have the answers on what I experienced or, I'm still trying to figure out some of this stuff. But at the same time, if someone's skeptical, like I think that's healthy. I think it's good. Like figure out all of the parts that can be debunked, and then you have your answer, right? Like, so like, I'd rather someone be skeptical than full on believing and just wanting more to, wanting the belief, because I'd rather go about it like more of a scientific approach of, yeah, like let's debunk the parts that aren't real and then get to the core of it. And then we actually have something, to stand on.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Good answer.
keep being a skeptic, I guess. Like that's honestly a healthy answer, but open-minded skeptic, somebody who's open to experience something for themselves.
Agree with you. Good answer. Couldn't have said that better myself. Chino, at the end of each episode, I do a rapid fire Q&A
Okay.
where I'll ask 3 questions, and it's the first thing that comes to your mind. It's casual. You ready?
All right.
All right. Vacation, beach or mountains?
Ooh, I've been craving beaches right now, but maybe mountains in the distance. Island mountains with the beach. Yeah, let's go there.
Combo. Sounds pretty good. All right. Number 2, favorite NFL or college football team?
Right now, Seahawks. Seahawks. I
Okay.
live out here. I adopted. So
There you go. They had a good season.
yeah, good timing.
Yes. All right. Number 3, favorite Bigfoot TV show, past or present?
I'm gonna go Venture Brothers. And if you know,
I
you
guess I've
know.
heard that one.
Yeah, if you know, you know.
Okay.
People who know it will know. And I encourage you to look up Venture Brothers Bigfoot episodes.
All right. I'll have to check that out. I've never heard that. I'll see what that's about. Well, Chino, I appreciate you coming on the show, taking time out of your schedule to come on here and have a conversation about Bigfoot and a pretty amazing encounter that you had in New Mexico. That's really insane.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks. This has been
Yeah.
actually a lot of fun. We can
Yeah,
do it
I've
again.
enjoyed it. Yeah, need to do that. Yeah, we need to part 2 and talk about some other things. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and for the listeners, if you've had an encounter or something strange or unexplained, email us at the Cryptid Crew Podcast at gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless.
Thanks, guys.